All right. Well, I'm glad I got the last video out of my system. This section certainly hits me hard. We were talking about the millennial generation in the relationships, marriage, and gender topic. So I had to sidetrack and make another video for the other series. I've got like 15 series going on at once. I'm trying to keep my mouth zipped and more fluffy, I suppose, for this series. This is more about information in this series rather than obviously personal. I don't want to bring personal stuff into this. It's rather hard. I am a human being. It is what it is. So, anyways, we are continuing on. This is part 2 of the millennial relationship section of the huge book. It turned out to be like 200 some pages. So, I am just going through my millennial book currently. Per request, I actually skipped Generation X. I had a request to do this video series, so here we are. Moving on, the core shift from containing to monitoring. In era 1, relationships were held together by structure, obligation, endurance, and social consequence. By era 3, those external stabilizers were gone. Attachment no longer developed inside containment, it developed inside constant evaluation. Millennials didn't ask, is this relationship socially acceptable? They asked, is this still safe, mutual, viable, and sustainable right now? This shift alone rewired bonding. All right, so we are talking about bonding in the millennials. So we have anxious attachment when safety became intermittent. Millennial anxious attachment is not about neediness, it is about inconsistent availability. As technology, economics, and gender roles destabilize simultaneously, millennials learned that connection could disappear without warning. Silence carried meaning, commitment was reversible, and reassurance was temporary. So the nervous system adapted by scanning for signals, seeking clarity through communication, checking for emotional presence, and trying to stabilize connection through responsiveness. This is not insecurity, it is threat detection in an unpredictable environment. Anxious attachment increased because availability became partial, texting and online presence. Exits multiplied, dating apps and social mobility. Reassurance lost permanence. The system taught if I don't stay alert, I might miss the moment it ends. Number 2, avoidant attachment. When self reliance became the only safe bet. Millennial avoidant attachment is not about emotional coldness, it is about risk management. As relationships absorb economic stress, emotional labor, and identity pressure, many millennials learned intimacy comes with hidden costs. Dependence increases vulnerability, repair is uncertain, and self regulation is safer than co regulation. So the nervous system adapted by minimizing needs, maintaining autonomy, exiting before collapse, and keeping emotional reserves private. Avoidance increased not because millennials don't want closeness, but because closeness became high risk without guarantee. The system taught if I need less, I lose less. Number 3, hyperverbal attachment, when communication became the only tool left. One uniquely millennial pattern is hyperverbal attachment. This is not emotional intelligence gone wrong. It is what happens when roles are unclear, expectations are unstated, repair scripts are missing, and boundaries are negotiable. Millennials learn to talk where structures used to exist. They process feelings out loud, negotiate meaning constantly, explain context repeatedly, and seek reassurance through words. Communication became a substitute for containment. The unspoken belief, if we keep talking, we can hold this together. When that fails, exhaustion follows, not because talking is bad, but because language was asked to do the job of infrastructure. Number 4, over functioning attachment. When someone has to hold the system, over functioning is one of the most common millennial bonding adaptations. It emerges when systems feel fragile. One person senses collapse first. Stability feels personal, not shared. Overfunctioners anticipate needs, regulate emotions, their own and others, carry planning, repair, and emotional load, delay their own needs for later. This is not control, it is compensatory stability. Compensatory stability. The nervous system learns, if I don't hold this together, I will fall apart. Overfunctioning often pairs with avoidant partners, not because of pathology, but because systems seek balance. Why these patterns cluster in millennials? Millennials often carry multiple attachment strategies at once. They can be anxious when stakes feel high, avoidant when costs feel too great, hyperverbal when clarity is missing, overfunctioning when systems feel unstable. This isn't consistency, it's situational intelligence. Their attachment systems learn to adapt quickly because environments changed mid development, rules were rewritten repeatedly, safety was conditional, and permanence was no longer assumed. Their nervous systems learn flexibility at the cost of rest. The hidden strength often missed. These attachment adaptations also produce strengths. Millennials are often emotionally perceptive, conflict aware, skilled at reflection, capable of repair, and deeply intentional about intimacy. They care about consent, boundaries, and impact because they had to, not because they were taught well, but because nothing else was holding. The cost. The cost of attachment under acceleration is fatigue. Millennials are tired of monitoring relationships, negotiating everything, holding ambiguity, and carrying emotional load alone. They do not fear intimacy, they fear uncontained intimacy. Millennial attachment patterns are not signs of emotional deficiency. They are intelligent adaptations to intimacy formed under accelerating change, unstable structures, and conditional safety. Repair and reorientation, part 1. How millennials rebuild polarity without going backward. Millennials do not need better communication, they need polarity rehab. Not roles, not ideology, nervous system repair. Number 1, restore the polarity container, clear agreements, and consistent behavior. Polarity returns when safety becomes predictable. Say what you mean, do what you say, repair quickly, and stop threatening exits. Consistency is erotic. It's also rare now, which is why it hits so hard. Number 2, feminine repair. Stop overfunctioning as a substitute for trust. Overfunctioning kills desire. The feminine cannot open when it's running the entire system. Repair looks like letting consequences happen, receiving without guilt, requiring follow through without managing it, and softening without self abandonment. Masculine repair rebuilds self respect through responsibility, not dominance. Modern masculinity collapses when it confuses power with worth. Repair looks like competence, emotional steadiness, initiative, protection through consistency, provision as reliability, not just money. A man becomes attractive again when he becomes trustworthy. Detox the erotic nervous system. If arousal is trained on novelty, intimacy will always feel boring. Repair looks like reducing novelty loops, porn, and feed addiction patterns, rebuilding arousal through presence, not performance, and letting sex become bonded again. Choose anti-algorithmic environments. Polarity needs focus. Apps train scanning. Millennials bond best in spaces that repeat contact, build reputation, create social accountability, and require effort before access. Stop treating equality like sameness. Equality is moral, polarity is energetic. You can be equal in dignity and still different in function. The goal isn't who needs who less. The goal is two regulated nervous systems exchanging trust. Millennials did not lose love. They lost the conditions that make polarity safe. And until safety returns, attraction will keep disguising itself as control, avoidance, and performance or war. What actually helps millennials bond now? Millennials do not need to be taught how to love. They need environments, internal and external, that make bonding possible again. Repair does not mean returning to the old contract. Reorientation does not mean surrendering to the new one. It means learning how to bond inside reality, not fantasy. Repair begins with removing impossible expectations. One of the most important shifts for millennials is this: intimacy cannot carry everything anymore. A partner cannot be your entire economic plan, your primary emotional regulator, your therapist, your best friend, your co parent in waiting, your identity mirror. That burden breaks relationships, not because love is weak, but because it was overloaded by collapse. Repair begins when millennials consciously redistribute pressure. Community matters again, friendships regain weight, solitude regains legitimacy. Meaning is not outsourced entirely to romance. This doesn't reduce intimacy, it protects it. Slowing the nervous system changes attachment more than insight. Millennials are often highly self aware and still dysregulated. That's because attachment is not resolved cognitively, it stabilizes semantically. What helps? Fewer conversations and more shared regulation, pacing connection instead of fast emotional disclosure, noticing how the body feels during intimacy, not just after, choosing consistency over intensity. Bonding strengthens when presence replaces performance, safety replaces stimulation, and rhythm replaces urgency. This is not about being less emotional. It is about letting the nervous system catch up to intention. Repair requires friction, not optimization. Millennials were trained by systems that removed friction everywhere else, but intimacy requires it. What actually builds trust? Showing up when it's inconvenient, tolerating discomfort without exiting, repairing misunderstandings instead of clarifying endlessly, staying when novelty fades. Algorithms taught if it's not easy, replace it. Repair teaches if it matters, stay with it. Friction is not failure, it is evidence of reality. Choosing environments that support bonding. Millennials bond better in contexts that slow choice. That is not moral judgment, it is nervous system reality. Bonding improves when meetings are repeated, not infinite. Social circles overlap, accountability exists, and the exits are not frictionless. This is why friendships deepen more easily than app based dating. Shared projects bond people faster than shared attraction. Work, learning, and service environments often outperform dating. The goal is not control, it is containment. Gender repair happens through capacity, not performance. Millennials do not need gender scripts, they need capacity based roles. Repair happens when emotional labor is named and shared. Provision is not reduced to money alone. Care is recognized as work. Desire is allowed to coexist with safety. Healthy polarity does not come from dominance or submission. It comes from complementary nervous system capacities. That requires honesty, not ideology. Reorientation means redefining success in love. For millennials, success in relationships is no longer permanence at all costs, perfect communication, total fusion, and aesthetic compatibility. Success looks more like emotional safety, repairability, shared pace, mutual responsibility, and room for individuality. This is quieter than the old dream, but is far more sustainable. What millennials are actually looking for. Despite exhaustion, millennials are not closed, they are discerning. They're ready for fewer connections with more depth, honesty over optimism, stability without rigidity, and intimacy that grows instead of performs. They do not need to try harder. They need conditions that stop fighting their nervous systems. Millennials do not struggle with intimacy because they fear closeness. They struggle because closeness was forced to survive without support. Repair begins when bonding is allowed to happen inside containment again. Resource hoarding and responsibility avoidance, often paired with entitlement to women's labor. It shows up as stable income, professional competence, capacity to provide, and refusal to contribute unless legally forced. That combination is not laziness, it's strategic disengagement. So, we're talking about the strategic disengagement of masculinity. What this actually is neoliberal masculinity. These men have internalized a worldview where money equals personal property, not relational responsibility. Children equal private choice, not collective obligation. Partnership equals emotional and sexual access, not shared risk. They treat family the way corporations treat labor. Extract value, externalize costs, and minimize liability. So they'll protect assets aggressively, frame contributions as being taken advantage of, and require enforcement to meet basic obligations. It's ideology plus incentive. Financial abuse without overt control. Refusing to pay for children while benefiting from women's unpaid labor, women's emotional regulation, and women's caregiving is a form of coercive neglect. They're not broke, they're withholding, and withholding is power. The provider role didn't vanish, it got privatized. These men did not reject provision, they redefined it. Provide for myself. I'll help if I'm praised or if it's convenient. Anything mandatory feels like theft. So they want the benefits of family, legacy, sex, and emotional support without the cost of money, time, and legal obligation. That is not partnership, it is consumption. Why court orders become necessary. So this is on the back end of Polarity not working out. So, because without enforcement, there is no internal moral break, there is no shared accountability structure, and there's no incentive alignment. The legal system becomes the surrogate masculine container, and that alone destroys trust. No woman feels safe bonding with someone who only does the right thing when forced. Why this pattern is showing up now. Three converging factors. Asset protection culture. Men are coached explicitly and implicitly to protect wealth at all costs, view dependents as liabilities, and fear being taken more than being absent. Algorithmic validation. Some men absorb content that frames women as extractive, child support as punishment, and responsibility as exploitation. Even men who are nice absorb this ambient suspicion. Women's overfunctioning enabled it. Hard truth, not blame. When women step in financially, carry the emotional load, shield children from absence, it reduces immediate consequences for male withdrawal. So the pattern persists. This isn't men failing to provide, it's men choosing self protection over stewardship and calling it equality. Why women feel rage and their right to. Because this behavior says your labor is expected, my money is mine, my children is your responsibility. If you want fairness, take me to court. That is not masculinity. That is abandonment with a paycheck. This is not all men, but it is a pattern among a subset of high functioning, low accountability men in late stage capitalism. They are competent at work, relationally extractive, and morally minimalist. And they are deeply unattractive once you see it clearly. You're not encountering confused partners. You're encountering men who understand responsibility, understand money, and understand consequences, and are choosing to avoid them unless forced. That is not misunderstanding, that is a value system. The post-contract family landscape. What replaces marriage when the old system collapses? First, the constraint set. What must be true? Any future family model that survives must account for these facts. Children still require time, money, stability, and protection. Women bear irreversible biological cost. Men currently face low enforcement for abandonment. Costs of living and child rearing are historically high. Trust between sexes is structurally low. Institutions no longer reliably absorb failure. Any model that ignores these realities fails in practice, no matter how romantic or moral it sounds. So we have Model 1, female-led kin networks, which are already expanding. Structure: mothers, sisters, grandmothers, aunts, close female friends, shared housing, childcare rotation, and pooled resources. Men optional, peripheral, or episodic. Why it works: women already do most caregiving, trust and accountability are higher, labor aligns with actual behavior, not promises. Children remain centered. Trade offs: emotional burnout risk, romantic intimacy deprioritized, men increasingly alienated from family formation. Reality check: this is not new. It is return to pre industrial matrilineal survival, now revived by cost pressure. Likelihood very high and already happening quietly. Model 2, single mother plus state enforcement hybrid. Structure: one primary parent, usually mother, stronger legal enforcement for support. State replaces absent partner as backstop. Why it exists: women will not abandon children. Men often exit without consequence. Courts become default co parents. Trade offs: bureaucratic stress, long timelines for justice, emotional isolation. Children raised inside systems, not families. Reality check: this is containment, not healing, but it stabilizes chaos. High likelihood, especially in urban and lower middle income populations. Model 3, opt out women, no marriage, no children. Structure: financial independence, no caregiving obligations, emotional investment redirected to work, friendships, and meaning. Why it works: avoids asymmetric risk, preserves health, time, and autonomy. Relational undercurrent incentives. Trade offs: loneliness, risk later in life, cultural backlash, and demographic collapse. Reality check: this is not selfishness, it is risk refusal. Likelihood high and rising, especially among educated millennials and Gen Z women. Model 4, parallel parenting. I gotta get comfortable. Oh gosh. I always sit like that. Okay. Structure: parents cooperate pragmatically, little romantic idealization, clear division of labor, legal and logistical clarity prioritized. Why it works: it removes fantasy from intimacy, minimizes emotional volatility, treats parenting as infrastructure, not destiny. Trade offs: limited passion, requires maturity most people weren't taught. Still vulnerable to male disengagement. Reality check: this model only works when accountability is enforced, not assumed. Likelihood moderate, works for disciplined, contract oriented adults. Model 5, high containment marriage, rare but stable. Structure, explicit role agreements, strong boundaries, shared economic strategy, limited external interference, and mutual accountability. Why it works: restores containment, limits ambiguity, and protects children and adults. Trade offs: requires exceptional self awareness, intolerant of entitlement, and filters out many men and women. Reality check: this is not traditional marriage. This is a new elite model. Likelihood low but durable. Small numbers, high stability. And model 6: serial cohabitation, situationship loop, high failure. Structure: short term bonds, emotional intensity, low responsibility, and high turnover. Why it persists: dopamine systems, low friction exits, and cultural normalization. Trade offs: emotional erosion, attachment damage, and poor outcomes for children. Reality check: this model cannot raise children safely. It survives only while people delay parenthood. Likelihood high in youth and collapses later. Model 7: male disengagement plus reproductive drift, which is the most dangerous. Structure: men reproduce without parenting, multiple children across households, women absorb consequences, children lack continuity. Why it happens: no enforcement, cultural collapse of shame, economic instability. Trade offs: intergenerational trauma, poverty cycles, and social breakdown. Reality check: this is already happening in pockets. It is the clearest sign of systemic failure. Likelihood high where enforcement is weak. The truth no one wants to say: there is no future where women carry children, labor, and risk alone, while men may retain freedom without consequence and society remains stable. That configuration collapses every time. What actually determines which model wins: not values, not dating advice, and not gender discourse, only incentives and enforcement. When abandonment costs nothing, irresponsibility spreads. When caregiving is unsupported, women opt out. When responsibility is optional, trust evaporates. When children are unprotected, systems rot. The quiet conclusion millennials are reaching: love without containment is unsafe. Children without protection are unacceptable. Men without accountability are unreliable partners, and opting out is rational, not bitter. Women aren't giving up, they are refusing to subsidize collapse. All right, and that is my relational, marriage, and gender section of my millennial generation video series here. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Feel free to comment your thoughts and feelings on this topic specifically, and I will eventually get my millennial book uploaded online. I do need to make a few edits, and that will be available for purchase in the near future. So, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next video.